Anyway, this isn't a heavy workshop. What I want to focus on most is the contact issue, because there's some things that if we're going to be interested in initiating contact with our simultaneous selves in other time vectors, or our simultaneous selves in inner Earth that are in a time vector that's closely woven here, or if you're going to communicate and contact anything out there, there are certain things that's good to know about what that means. The first big thing the ego needs to overcome is realizing they're real. Just because you can't yet see them doesn't mean they're not real. And just because you get to the point where you realize they're real, everything that talk to you is not going to be a good thing. All right? There are negative things that try to, hook into people out there. The channeling movement is full of them. One of the greatest illusions that's being conducted right now has to do with the UFO movement. 99% of the time, if you are dealing with a guardian or a guardian race, unless there is a tactile reason why it has to be done this way, 99% of the time, they will never, ever, ever use spaceships. Ever. Unless there's no other way for the contact to take place, and it's extremely important that it does at a given time. Unless they have to transport you someplace that your DNA can't handle yet, and the spaceship works as a buffer, a frequency buffer that can take you through a portal temporarily where you won't be harmed. Now, it really amazes me. I've been invited, unfortunately, to attend several sky watches where you get groups of people going, "Oh, I think that's one. Oh, I think that's one." And sometimes they are, 90% of the time they're not. But if they are, almost 100% of the time, they're Zeta or they're Palladian Nibiruan. The ones that are putting on the big shows right now that are letting people see them are not Guardian craft. Guardians have a very difficult time bringing their craft in because our planetary grids are so controlled right now by the Anunnaki grids. The Anunnaki have threatened from the beginning that if we brought ships in, because our guys were ready to say, bring ships in, the Maharaji, which have done it before, from Sirius B, they have come in with major fleets before. And the period of time when the Mahabharata book in India came out were called the Centurion Wars. They came in and stopped full takeover from taking place here. Literally fleets in the skies and Star Wars. And they defeated the Palladian Nibiruans and the Draconian fleets, and they withdrew. So it has happened here many times before, where all of a sudden, you don't believe in UFOs? Well, look up, because they're there. But the grids are so contaminated right now that most of the major vortices to get into this planet with spaceships are controlled by Anunnaki. The Anunnaki had told the Guardian groups, and so did the Dracs, that you go in and stage anything, and we'll just simply start Star Wars right over their heads. Star Wars, during a stellar activation cycle, will instantly create pole shift. You start throwing photoradionic, and this is the weapons they use. It's photoradionic and photosonic. These are sound waves that go blasting across millions of miles. I mean, instantly. That can do horrendous levels of damage, but they totally mess up the planetary grids. So the Guardians have kind of had their hands tied as far as coming in and making any demonstrations of mass contact, because the other two groups were controlling the portals and vortices, and the Guardian groups are here to stop pole shift, and if they came in and Star Wars started as a result, it would have created pole shift. So that's why they have been using subtle forms of communication rather than demonstrations. The ones that come in and do the most fancy footwork are the Pleiadians. They're called the Samjaze Anunnaki. They're from the Pleiades, from Alcyone and several other satellite places in the Pleiades. And there's groups of them on Nibiru as well. They're one of what's called the Luciferian races. They were part of the Luciferian covenant that was in the Atlantean period, the agreement, a formalized treaty that this group of Anunnaki races, the Samjaze Pleiadians being one of them, were going to come in here progressively, wipe out the history and any evidence of the real history, and they were going to create grid shift to wipe out the memory matrix in the human DNA and recode it so we couldn't remember. So when the 2020-17 stellar activation cycle came, they would simply come in, be our buddies, and march us off into oblivion and take over the planet. That was their plan. The Samjaze Pleiadians are Anunnaki, and they are one of the groups that entered this Luciferian covenant in the Atlantean period, and they have been actively pursuing it ever since. if you hear about people like Billy Meyer, I forget where he's from, I think maybe Brazil or something. Switzerland? All right, he's dealing with some Jase directly. It's a pretty little blonde lady that looks like a Barbie doll that comes in and, you know, calls herself some Jase. It's not her name, it's the group she represents, but she's using it because nobody else knows the difference. And she's she's actually not even a she. She's an entity that uses that body image to connect. They have ships, they have very beautiful ships. When you see the Palladian ships, it's density 2 technology, and they're utterly gorgeous. They come in with all the lights. You think you're in Close Encounters of the Third Kind movie, if you ever saw that back in the days when that came out. You know, the beautiful lighted ships, and they can do the sound tones. These are the type of ships that the Nibiruans are coming in on. They're staging this stuff to create, to get their chosen ones. The ones who have the gene codes that they've already zeroed in on, and they honor them with contact. So the people go, gaga, oh wow, you know, the Palladians like me. They think the Palladians are good things. One thing I would like you to be aware of, if you're going into the issue of contact, the last thing you need to care about is whether a spaceship comes down and shows itself. The masters don't use spaceships, they use Merkaba, which means they use portals and vortices, and they activate their biofields in a way that they can simply hop through them. And that is what you're being trained to do. Now, you may we may all have a time when the spaceships come again. I saw the spaceships. I was taken on the Guardian spaceships because when I was a child, they couldn't take me through the portals, and they needed to get me to inner Earth for some of the activation sequences. But because the Zetas had messed with our gene code at the time in early childhood, they had to bring in their ships to be able to take me through without exploding my body so they could do the repair work on the gene code. So I did have the experience of going on these ships. I know what they look like, some of them. The Guardian ships they're interesting. At times they'll commandeer vehicles. So you might end up with one having a Zeta craft or one having a Palladian craft. You can't tell by the look because most of the Guardian races don't use them. Now, the ones from Sirius B, the Maharaji humans, the blue humans, do have their own ships. They have various style ones, but they usually look like balls, like big balls of light when they come in. And they kind of morph once they come into density 1. And they'll take on the form of solidity, when before they looked like a big ball of light that was moving around. So they're like transharmonic spacecraft that literally shapeshift from one place to the next. And when they get down here, they will take on a form, and there's various different kinds of them. You can't say, oh, well, these are square and these are round. The only ones you can really identify by shape directly are the Zeta ones that are coming out of cooperation between the Zeta and the governments, the human governments. The United States, Britain, Russia, France, and China have certain representatives that are equivalent to MJ-12, or that Majestic 12 group that has expanded. They have worked with Zeta technology, not just back engineering it, but taking directions directly from the Zetas on how to build craft. The Zeta craft that are the combination, the hybrid craft between Zeta and government, are the ones that look like big black triangles from underneath. They remind you of the stealth fighters, but they're hyperdimensional. They can bop into density 2 and go into D4 frequency and disappear. These are the ones they use for most of the Zeta abductions. There's also Zeta craft that look like little crowns, where they're the one who has the photographs, and there are photographs of these, is Ed Walters. He's from Florida, and I forget the area exactly. It's not my area where I live. That's it, Gulf Breeze, Florida. All right, the guy, now he wasn't a fake. They tried to really drown him and bury him to make him look like a fake because he had photos, and they were good photos. He had photos of the ships, and he had photos of the blue beams coming down from him. He wasn't a fake, but the Illuminati guys tried to discredit him and say, oh, they found models of the things up in his house and stuff like that. These photos were real. He wasn't a fake, and he wasn't an Illuminati plant. I don't know if they've got to him since, but those crown-shaped, I call them crown-shaped because it's an odd shape. They kind of go like this and then come down, and then they go like this. They almost look like a little crown or the top of a scepter or something. Yeah, their Gulf Breeze sightings, I think, was the first book that he published a bunch of the photos in. They were like color templates in the little like paperback book. They were excellent to give you an idea of what these guys look like. So when you're seeing ships, you know, you have some idea of what you're dealing with. The Guardian groups never ever use the black triangles. Even if they commandeer one, they just don't use them. They're inferior technology because they're Earth-based technology, and they have very limited range. So they wouldn't be the ships they would choose even if they got a hold of some of them. Because Guardians are like, if they have to use mechanical technology, they would rather recycle resources than, you know, make messes and have to build their own. So that's why they will commandeer vehicles if they happen to, you know, have abandoned ships someplace, or they were in a war or something with ones and some of them went down and were left. They'll take them and fix them rather than, you know, waste them. So the only ones I've seen Guardians use that are similar to any of the others are the crown-shaped ones. Sometimes you'll get Guardian groups in them. But if you ever have a counter with those guys and you see the crown-shaped craft and you have some kind of weird encounter, because they do this, if it's Zetas, or Zetas or any of the Illuminati groups, they will kind of do a frequency modulation beam at you, which creates a temporary bioneurological block in your nervous system. What this does is, first of all, it wipes out the memory of what's going to happen. All right, like after the fact, you won't have that memory sequence actively available. It's in there someplace, but you're going to have to dig for it and recode the programming that they use to scramble your natural brainwave patterns. You will also find within this that if you try to run, this bioneurological block affects the motor skills. So you just find yourself frozen and you can't move. And if you try to scream, nothing comes out. So your eyeballs work where they can move from side to side, and they kind of usually do really quick if you realize you're in the middle of an abduction, you know, because you're terrified. But you can't express the terror because they've got your body neutralized. Guardians don't do this. All right, so if you ever have any of those type of encounters, I don't care how sweet they seem to be with the memory implants they gave you to remember the experience, Guardians do not neutralize you with a force field. They do not repress your memory unless there's something so traumatic in your own history that your own soul will regulate how soon you can remember if it would push you over the edge into total dysfunction in this lifetime. But there are certain characteristics, so you know the difference of what you're dealing with in contact. When you're dealing with a group like this, and when you're dealing with the guys I know, okay, the Eieyani and the Guardian Alliance, and there are literally billions of different races involved with the Guardian Alliance. These are the founders' races and those who have always honored them. And I can vouch for them over many lifetimes. I know who they are. But I was always, even with contact with them, still very, very aware of what are they asking me to do with my power. This is one of the most important things that you can ask yourself in any type of contact. What are they asking me to do with my power? Are they telling me to hand it over to them and simply let them guide you? Guardians won't do that. They'll suggest things to you. They will never tell you you have to. They will offer their opinions, but they will not insist that you agree. They will honor your right as a person